Guess what? You're getting cued in already. Go ahead and go, Bill.
Okay, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Into Joe's Train Room. We've changed up the format a bit. Today is Wednesday, September 19th, 2018. We are coming to you live from the greatest city in the world, New York. And tonight we're changing up a few things. Tonight's show is changed into Joe's Train Room.
No.
We've completed into the workshop. We completed a few, did some weathering, some detailing, and some upgrading to engines with Joe Desmond. And now we're going into a new format in September. And we're kicking off the season with operations and how it's going to be done. And hopefully we have 3 segments of this that we're going to do. And let me do the homework first, because I always got to get the homework out of the way or I get yelled at by the principal. Yeah. As you know, YouTube Model Builders is continuing to go forward in September and through the modeling season, which constitutes the fall weather and into the winter and right through into the new year. So starting on October 9th, which we've already had one show, is the Fine Scale Show. And on October 17th, we will do the second part of Into Joe's Train Room. That will be episode 2 on operations. And as always, we have Johnny's Train Talk Show, which is on every Thursday at 9 p.m. Central Time, 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. The shows that I mentioned earlier, the Fine Scale Show and Joe's Train Room, will air at 8 p.m. Central Time and 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And we got Who's Big Bill Talking? Who is Big Bill Talking to? Will air in between those shows. We will try to get Big Bill, more people, more exciting modelers to come forward, and so that we can interview them. And we're working on a show right now with Steve Brown and Ron Marsh. Hopefully we can get together with them and figure something out. So that's something we're doing. Anyway, tonight's show, let me introduce first. We have Joe Desmond, of course, named Into Joe's Train Room. And we have William the Track Runner Veronic, the man, the myth, and the legend.
Yeah.
You know, he is my all-time favorite model railroader, and so is Joe. But Bill comes with the wealth of knowledge. Tonight's show, we're going to talk about operations, and tonight's show is going to be in regard. Everybody has a railroad out there, or some people want to design a railroad and have a railroad. Some people have a 4x8. Some people have a large layout. As you can see, we're in my train room in the South Brooklyn Railroad. This is just to throw it out there. Bill Baronic designed this layout, and I put it together and been successful, and I've had plenty of enjoyment with it. But after you get the track laid and the scenery down, as you can see, you want to do something. And in doing something, what do you want to do? And that's one of the things that Bill always asks before he starts a project with somebody who takes on a job is, what do you want? You want a rail fan and watch your trains go around in circle, or do you want to do something and operate? Now, we can have a whole show on that itself, operation and rail fanning and watching trains go in a circle. Some guys just want to watch their trains go around, the equipment they bought, and that's great. That's great. Have a bottle of beer, an adult beverage, and just sit back and relax. That's cool. Others really get into in-depth prototypical operations and really get down to the fine nitty-gritty. Tonight, we're going to bring that out. We're going to have 2 sides of the coin here. Joe Desmond is a prototypical operator. I've been to Joe's house. I've operated at his layout, and the whole nine yards, the whole shebang. Radios, call sheets, switch lists, the whole 9 yards. And Bill takes the, I would say, more relaxed attitude towards it, having fun with it, adhering to the call cards, but both sides will be presented and both sides will be talked about. And just so that you guys know, there's no right or wrong here. So there's no this isn't counterpoint and face the nation kind of thing or face the train room kind of thing. It's not. It's it's not about that. It's supposed to have fun, but we want to present all sides to it. And you, the model railroader, you who have the layout, you're the one who has to find that that niche, that comfort level where you feel. So with that, I will turn it over to Joseph and to Bill Barana. And here's the opening question. Since I've been doing this layout here, this is my layout. I went along the lines of Bill Baronic in regards to keeping it simple, KISS, keep it simple, stupid. And it's been working so far. And I went over to you, Joe, and I watched you. I did what you had to do. I did what you required and what you wanted. I found them both intriguing, both, and I'm still coin flipping it up in the air. But what's the preparation? What's the preparing of the little paperwork for this? Go.
Well, a lot of research went into this. I did a lot of rail fan type research and got as much of it from the Conrail Historical Society as I could because I want to emulate, the area that I model here in Central Jersey and as best as I can because there's a story to tell. You look at these facilities that I'm modeling, like right over my shoulder here. National Lead. That facility's gone. And I like the stories. Think about how many guys went there day after day, 30, 40 years of their lives were spent in that facility, and it's gone. It's gone away to history. And I think it's important to tell those stories of what they did and how they did it, because when they're gone and they move on in the next phase of their life, who's going to tell their stories? So that's what I really base my layout on, is telling the story of these guys and girls who worked in these facilities and worked on these railroads.
Interesting. I like that. I think that's good. I think Bill, you. So no, I'm sorry, Joe. What were you going to say?
Yeah. So I delved into a lot of the historical stuff, the history, and the sites to get this information to try and piece it all together. But I'm sure Mr. Bronick will attest to it. When you start getting into this research, railroads are very secretive. They don't want to release a lot of their documents. And even though Conrail's gone 20 some odd years now, it's still hard to find a lot of the documentation. So it kind of becomes an Indiana Jones type of movie where you're searching for these lost artifacts to put it all back together. So it's an interesting, puzzle.
I'd like to ask Joe a question because I don't think we've even talked about this. Why'd you choose Conrail?
That just goes back to my childhood because living here, that's all I saw was Conrail. And my first in-scale locomotive that I bought on my own was a Conrail unit. And being 6 or 7, I didn't know anything about Conrail. I just knew there were the blue locomotives I saw all the time. And as I got older, doing the research, and it's a phenomenal story. I mean, Conrail is an amazing American success story when you get down and break it down. So, and I kind of fell in love with it. So.
I took a different. And of course, you do in-scale. I did HO, but because of the track planning business, I get so many clients who. They've got 5 pounds of space and they want to put 10 pounds of railroad in it. Well, fortunately, I knew what kind of space I had, which was pretty big. It was almost 20 by 20. But I didn't want to try to model a Class 1 railroad because I didn't have that kind of space to do it. And I didn't want to model just a little part of it. So I went looking for basically a regional railroad, one that I could, in 20 by 20 space, I think make it believable. That's my big thing about even track plans. Is the track plan believable when you get done with it? So with a little bit of research, not a whole lot actually, I was just looking for a railroad. I found the Camas Prairie Railroad up in north central Idaho. And the great thing about the Camas Prairie was they only had about 400 or 500 miles of track. And as I did what Joe did, researched it, I found an area from Lewiston, Idaho to Grangeville, Idaho, 66 miles. In that 66 miles, there was a 3,000-foot elevation change. Now, that's perfect for a model railroad when you're trying to build one within a 20 by 20-foot space, because you have to loop back over itself. I mean, mine did a couple times, the main line looped back over, and it was all justified because the real railroad, again, within 66 miles went up 3,000 feet. And actually, they covered the 3,000 feet in probably about 10 miles of that 66. But it was a regional railroad that I could model and, again, make it believable to me. And it's gone now. Everything you'll see tonight, the railroad's been gone for about 8 years, but we held close to 24 op sessions on it. And so Joe's on about, I think you're starting your third or fourth one there, Joe.
We're getting ready. November will be our fifth. Okay,
your fifth, great. See, I've done almost a couple dozen, so I've got a slight leg up on Joe, knowing where all the mistakes are going to be made. So we got two different railroads here. We got a kind of a little regional railroad, and we've got a big class 1 railroad that he's modeling a small part of.
Right. So I guess now what we should get into is, this series here, I want to teach everybody how to do this type of operations, how to get your paperwork going so you can do a realistic operation. And, the general theme throughout these coming episodes that you're going to be seeing here is I'm not, just because I have 11 by 14 and Mr. Bronick, what was the dimensions on your track plan? It was
about 20 by 20.
20 by 20. I eventually want to teach everybody out there, you don't need a ginormous space. You could do a realistic operation on a 4x8. I mean, so that's where we're going to get to. I think that's where we're going to climb to, so to speak. So, and I think tonight,
I think you both agree upon is that tonight we want to do showing different types of hard card storage pockets, familiarizing layouts, and setting up layout for an op session and stuff like
correct.
that.
Yeah. We're gonna get started. I think doing the paperwork to get you an idea of which direction you want to go, because there's multiple directions, and Mr. Brock's going to show you one type of setup, and I'm going to show you another. So this way you can kind of understand what you need to think about in setting up for an operations on your layout, no matter what the size is.
Well, just so that clue everybody in, when I started doing this, writing out my cards, your hand gets very cramped. Mr. Baronic would call me up periodically and say, have you finished yet? And I said, no, not yet. He says, okay, I'll call me when you finish. I said, okay.
How many freight cars you got on that layout, Bill?
I don't know. I have 5 bins. And that's another thing. See, this is the operations, and then I believe, and you correct me if I'm wrong, there's like subsections to this.
Mm-hmm.
How many cars should you have on your layout? How many cars are interchangeable? How many cars do you want to run on your layout? What's feasible? As you all know, we all want to collect as much as we want and to buy, and sometimes you got to curtail that and say enough's enough. Like, I know with this layout, this is a point-to-point layout. It's a heavy switching layout. All the cars that I have truly will never see the light of day on this layout.
Well, we won't talk about it tonight. I think we'll do another show. But
what I'm saying is there's subsections to this.
Well, the question I'll ask my clients all the time when they want to do an operations layout is, it's an interesting question because you get multiple answers. I'll ask them, when is a yard full? When is your classification yard full? And I won't tell you tonight. Most of you know probably anyway, but the answers I get are completely wrong, totally wrong on what is considered a full yard.
Right. So hopefully this show is going to expand. Like I said, that topic alone of how many cars you have, that we have subsets of this operation. But tonight we're going to concentrate on the paperwork. because every place runs on paper. It's a paper railroad, regardless of what we make. You run the big engines, the small engines, the model engines, it's still a paper railroad.
All right.
Well, go ahead, gentlemen. Take over.
All right. So when I first got started planning for operations, the first thing what I did is I went through and I made a spreadsheet. I went and got all the industries that I'm going to be modeling, and I just made a simple spreadsheet here in a book, and I color coded it, and the different colors to the commodities, who's getting it, who's receiving it, who's shipping out. I just color coded in there, so I had a visual representation. Then I had an idea of how many tank cars did I need, and how many hopper cars did I need, and just to run a basic 4-cycle weigh bell system. So once I got this made the whole thing that much easier to set up. So then I decided to go with the Micromart system. I looked at a bunch of different systems out there for car cards and weigh bells. I kind of liked the idea that the Micromart was a printed card that came. I could fill it out the way I wanted to and play around with it, and it seemed easy for me to just get it up and running quickly. I didn't have to delve into computer databases and all that stuff. So the Micromart system is really nice, I think, because when you order it, you get in the kit, they start you out with a couple of bill boxes, which are these here. Let me move my camera around a little. And then they give you these wooden boxes and they're already done. You can paint these up. I see a lot of people paint them and stuff. I just figured, I'm just going to go with wood. So they give you some bill boxes to get you started. Then they give you a bunch of the car cards, which are these tan things in here. Hold that up and see, is it washing out because of the light? It probably is. Right in there. So what I do is I use the car cards and I set them up, and you can put all the information in there. I also, because I model in scale, I went with pictures on the bottom. So it's probably going to work better if I do this. There you go. So see, I put a little picture of the car on the bottom. I fill out all the freight card data, where I want it to go back to at the end of the session if it's empty, and I fill out one for each car. I think last count, I think I was somewhere in like 200 cars. So I got about 200 car cards floating around here. The other thing that Micromart gives you is the 4-cycle weigh bill, and they're already printed out. So the car card denotes the car, and the weigh bill tells you what to do with the car. Tells you where to go, what's being shipped in it, who's receiving it, who's sending it. It also has some routing information, what train you want it on. So I'm going to hold that up here and block my face out, and it just whited out again. Okay, I'll quit moving it.
While everybody's trying to get that into focus there, Andy Crawford says in regards to the size of the yard and the activity, he says depends on the size versus activity though. The style of classification, a marshalling yard needs less free space, but general freight 50%. Hump yards have an entirely different set of criteria. You're absolutely correct, but
there we go.
There we go. Now we're hooking up. Now we're cooking.
Butter. So you can see on the top, it has the consignee, it has the shipper, the routing, via, and the lading. So what you do is, this system, when you get it, you're going to open it out of the box. You can get your car cards already. You're like, yeah, I'm ready to go, right? I sat here and looked at these cards for 4 days. Couldn't figure out how to fill them out. So what you have to do is, the best way I found to do it was take the car and put it at the industry. So this is capital steel here. And then work the route. So say if we start it where it's empty, and it's got to go back to where it came from to get reloaded. Then I followed it so it goes from here to the yard. Then it goes from the yard to the staging yard, because my staging yard in the closet is our connection to the outside world. And that's where you flip your your car from being empty to full again, and then you bring it back up to the yard to be brought down here to be delivered. So once I figured that, I'm beg your pardon.
Got a buzz on your mic.
Oh, come on. So once I figured that out, it became easier. I think that's the biggest stumbling block with everybody with this car card and waybill system for Micromart is trying to figure out where to start, because it's a little overwhelming when you get kicked off. So once I got that down and used to that spreadsheet that I showed you, it really helped me figure out how to get it going. The other thing that's you get with the Micromart system is the engine cards. And I just had it in
the gray ones.
Beg your pardon?
Gray ones.
Gray one. You remember? Oh, you have.
No, everybody thinks I'm another pretty face. It's not true.
So there's the engine card. Now, you know, as soon as it comes into focus, you'll be able to read it. And stop moving. The engine card has the locomotive type, the road number. You can also put in there the decoder address, and I put a little picture in there to help everybody. So those are the two basic car cards that come with the system. Any questions so far?
No, nobody's asked any question. I have a question though.
Fire away.
How is it that you get the photo on there? That may seem like a really knucklehead question, but I don't think there's such a thing as that.
Get
How
the
do you
what?
do that?
You cut out on me.
How do you get that photo on there? Do you print that photo out from a prototype?
So I line up a bunch of cars, 20, 30 cars. I put my DSLR up on a tripod, and I just take picture after picture after picture, make a catalog, and I print them out in little contact sheets size on your for Windows, and then I just cut them out. I tape them right onto the bottom there with Scotch tape. So they're just affixed to the bottom. That's it. So now I've taken this Micromart card system and kind of made it my own by adding these pictures.
Well, then you're easy, since it's an N-scale layout, it's easy to identify the car itself as a cue to the number of the
Absolutely,
car
because
Where is that?
I'm fairly good and been doing it a while. I have trouble reading those numbers sometimes. I can't imagine other people. And I think I haven't gotten any complaints so far in our fourth session, so I think it's working out pretty good. So.
Okay, we got a question. Mr. Baronic, Bill. I'm calling you Mr. Baronic because I'm Bill and you're Bill.
That's fine. I'm older than you.
Yeah, well, I didn't want to do that. I got just as much gray hair as you do, but I just want that people will understand what we're saying. In regards to what Joe's doing, I know that me and you talked extensively in regards to the car.
Right. Well, I think there's enough difference here where people are going to, when we get done tonight, hopefully they'll have a choice. And like you said earlier, there's no right or wrong here. It's just what you want to do. Johnny, bring up that slide where it's got the Santa Fe hopper on it, car card. There, if you can. I can show it on my here if we have to. I mean, would you rather have me do that? Oh, okay. I'm sorry. You can't. Okay, it's a new car card. And it'll have a picture of a Santa Fe hopper on it. I had the advantage, maybe over Joe, because of where I live here. There's a lot of railroads out here in Colorado, model railroads, and 3 of the ones that I operate on are absolutely world-class layouts. They've been published numerous times. Each of them has a different operating session. So I had the benefit of learning from these guys who had already done it. And, I picked out the goods and the bads on it and that. Okay. I make my own car cards there because maybe I'm a little cheap. But this is I just produced this, I think, either in Word or Excel. I really can't remember. Similar to Joe's from the standpoint of we kind of have the same information, except my picture is at the top. And there's a really, really good reason for that. At least this is what I've learned with these other layouts. When you put the car card, and we'll talk about the car card here in a minute, but when you put the car card into the pocket of my the waybill. I'm sorry. When I put the waybill in the pocket of this car card, that picture still is seen, and it's seen even when it's in the pockets on the front of the fascia. And this, I think all of us are pretty visual. And even though I'm doing HO, this made it easy for the operators, but primarily for what I learned operating out here, this makes it super easy for your yard master. Your yard master can look at the car. He knows what he's looking for pretty quickly. And in a yard where you might have 100 or 150 cars sitting in the yard, it sure makes it a lot easier to find. Again, the same information is basically there that was on Joe's. I just tried to arrange it in a way where when the waybill is in the slot, you can still see all the information. The return to car empty thing, honestly, I didn't use that a whole lot because of the way I set up my op sessions, but it's there. And Joe has it on his too. It comes with those micro-mark ones and that. But again, I just did this myself. Now, bring up, Johnny, the waybill. It's a CPRR waybill. Let me know when that's up. Because where I deviate from Joe on this is, yeah, I maybe made my own car cards, but I went and bought a software program to do my waybills. Okay, now this, some of you are familiar with this. This is by Shenandoah software, and you print them out on basically the size of business cards. So what you can do is you can go to Office Depot or whoever, Staples, and you can buy business cards, and this will print them out. The thing I like about these is I can put as much information on there as I want, or I can put as little information. And what looks like a lot of information on this card really isn't. There at the, let's start at the top there where it says Spalding. Okay, the LO stands for a grain, a hopper car. Most of us know that. The one was simply that it was the first side of the waybill there. The Spalding was the name of a town that was on my layout of Spalding, Idaho, that had 4 or 5 industries in it. All the yard master, and by color coding that at the top, for my yard master, when he was making up a train, and on my layout, not to jump ahead too far here, but on my layout, I color coded every train that ran on the layout with a different color. So when the yard master was making up trains in the yard, the classification yard, he didn't care, or she, where that car was going to in Spalding. This one here, it happened to be going to Spalding Cement. But he didn't care about that. All he was doing was making up a train that was going to Spalding. Well, he didn't hardly even have to read the top of it. He just seen the color, and he just put cars, block cars out based on the color. I did not block cars for the industries. I let the operators, when they got to the town, do their own work in that. I simply had the yard master put the card in there. Now, there's a lot more that you could have put on this thing, but I didn't do it because I wanted to make it as simple as possible. If you were to flip the card over and look at it the other direction, you see it says UP East there, and it was also a hopper. I had 4 through freights on my layout, and those through freights ran from staging to staging. 2 were UP, 2 were Burlington Northern. Why? Just to step back for a second, the CP&R was actually jointly owned by the Burlington Northern and the Union Pacific for a number of years. They shared expenses and they shared the profits from there. So that was kind of great for me. I was able to run UP and Burlington and be totally prototypical on that. When you flip the card over there, this particular car, this cement hopper, I only had two ways that it went. It went to the Spalding Cement Company, and then when it left there, it left and went to Rapid City, South Dakota. Well, it really didn't. It just went to staging. But then when we brought it back, it came back, went into the yard, got back. It got flipped so it said Spalding, and now the yard master put it back in the train and went to Spalding. This car simply went 2 places. I didn't use the 4-cycle on it because it wasn't really necessary on my railroad. This may look harder, but once you get to know how the software works and everything, and the fact that I could color code like this, it really, really worked well for me. So there's Joe using the MicroMart, which is perfectly fine. He had to handwrite everything out. Here, what I was able to do, even on my car cards, I was able to, print it and just have the printer printed out. I didn't have to do any handwork here. Once you got into using the software, I could put these car cards together pretty quickly. Okay.
So Mike G has a question. He says, "Hi guys. Hi Mike, how are you?" What? Am I? Okay. Okay. Director's tour. Yeah? Okay. China? No, we're not talking about China. Mike G says, "Hi guys. How do you go about actually making a train up?" That's a universal question for both of you guys, I think, in both situations. Go about. Now, I know this is a rudimentary hard cards, and I know that we can't cover it all. We could probably be on this all night, but Bill Baronic has an article that's coming out at the end of this month or the beginning of October on the Modelers Journal, and Bill writes for that magazine, and he'll be doing I guess you would say a follow-up to this. You had written it.
It's a follow-up, a little more detail than what we're doing.
Right. Tonight. Right. That will be in the end of September, beginning of October on the Modelers Journal. You can find them on www.themodelersjournal.com. You can find out more. There's more information on that. But Mike G wants to know, how do you actually go about making up a train for operation?
Go ahead, Joe. I'll chime in.
So the way I make up trains is I bring up a turn, and Conrail's designation for it was a transfer from a large feeder yard in Newark, which would be represented in staging. I bring that train down into my yard. Once that train gets there, I then flip the waybills to cycle 1. And when that's what the operator of that train does. And he hands over the packet of all. What I do is I clip everything together with a binder clip with the locomotive card like this. So the operator of that transfer run flips all the cars to cycle 1 and hands it to the yard master. Then the yard master can go through and look and say, okay, I got to break up this transfer train into 5 different way freights that are going to leave this yard throughout the op session. And that's how we make up the trains.
Now, see, that's interesting because he brings, if I'm hearing you right, Joe, you brought a complete train in. That complete train got disassembled in the yard, and those cars went out to other places.
Correct. The OI-16 came out of Oak Island. It came down southbound on the Chemical Coastline, then cut over into Brown's Yard in Sayreville. And that train only serviced, it would come down with about 40 or 50 cars for Brown's Yard. So
and is that what the Conrail did?
That is what Conrail did, correct.
Okay. So, yeah, so you're doing prototypical. As I mentioned earlier in mine, I had 4 through freights, an AM and a PM, Union Pacific, and Burlington Northern. Those trains, my longest train on this railroad I had was about 15 to 16 cars. What I would do with the through freight, I would say we were running the AM through freight. It would come out of staging. I had 2 staging yards, one at each end of the railroad there. So it would come out of my staging yards. So if it makes any difference regionally, I had west staging and I had east staging, which simply meant this: everything that came out of west staging was coming from the west, going east, and everything coming out of the east was going west. And it all ran through Lewiston Yard up in Idaho. Well, this 15-car train, I had maybe 6 or 7 cars that needed to get dropped off at Lewiston Yard. In Lewiston Yard, if the previous operating session had gone right, there were 6, 7, or 8 cars in Lewiston Yard that needed to go into that through freight that was heading eastbound. So what would happen is the train would come in, the yard master would switch out the 7 or 8 cars that needed to come out. He would put in the 6 or 7 or 8 cars that needed to keep going eastbound. And that's how I kept the yard from getting too jammed up, because I was kind of moving out the same number that I was bringing in. Now, those 6 or 7 cars that came in on that through freight, they didn't all go to the same place. Like Joe said, they were spread out over the layout there. And that was the yard master's job. That was his job, to sort those and put them in trains. That's where I go back to that away bill where I had those colors there. What was good for my yard masters is all they had to do once they knew how the railroad worked was look at the color, and they knew which train that went in. Joe talked about turns. On my railroad, I had, and we'll show this a little later when I show an op session sheet here. I had through freights, I had locals, and I had turns. That was pretty much what I had. And the way Joe described his turn is exactly right. The turn would come in from some place that it came from, and it would drop off every car. Now that turn, Joe, that you had,
yes,
did that same turn run later in the off session back to where it came from?
Yes, but one little step that we got to backtrack is for operational interest in the session. I took the OI-16 was 50 cars long. I didn't want to be dealing with 50-car trains, so I broke it into 2 25-car trains. And to vary it up, I ran the second half of that train, comes out of the south and runs northbound. So this way you have 2 opposing turns coming to meet in the yard, but they're spaced out through the session. So the first turn comes in, dumps its car, the yard master makes up the outbounds to go back to Newark. Then the second turn comes in from the south, running northbound out of Camden, goes to the yard, does the same thing, and then reverses backtrack.
Yeah, well, my turns actually all originated in Lewiston Yard, and I had them run out to specific towns, and they switched that town. I would have the Craigmont, Idaho turn, which was a town in Idaho there, and that train would go out with all the cars for Craigmont there. Mm-hmm. Or I would have, like you see on the picture, the Spalding. I would have the Spalding turn, and that train left Lewiston, went out to Spalding, set out and picked up cars, and then came back to Lewiston with all of the cars. The engine would unhook, it would go to servicing, and then the yard master would take those cars that were being brought back from Spalding and sorted those out into whatever trains they were supposed to go into. The interesting thing I'd like to ask you, Joe, because I didn't know this till you said it, and this will be interesting for me. You said you broke it into 2 25-car trains, correct?
Correct. Yes.
Is 25 cars on your layout too many for the yard master to switch? Does it take too much time?
The first 3 sessions, I was beginning to think that until session 4, which we just did a week ago, we actually pulled it off. All 50 cars, both turns, were able to be done within the 4-hour limit.
That's a pretty good job there. That's 2 pretty hard jobs.
I had a banging yard master, and he did a phenomenal job. My crews, the guys running the way freights, which are the little small trains that run out from the yard and go back, the crews running the way freights, they get the job done. My Achilles heel has been the yard operations, and I think we may have solved the problem. And it was just been tweaking and moving things around. For instance, when I initially did the schedule, I did a Monday and a Tuesday schedule, and then we alternate. So on a Monday, I had 7 trains. Well, only 6 trains ran during that session, and we held a large block of the 7th train, which just the only thing it did was come back out of the yard and get put back on that turn to go back into staging. So then I was like, that's slowing the yard master down. It's clogging up the yard. So I just said, we don't need it. And I eliminated that. So each cycle, on 4 cycles, I eliminated a train on each cycle. And that took about probably about 10 to 15 cars off of each cycle. And I think that's maybe what pushed us to be able to get it done.
Well, I think what everybody needs to understand in an operating session, the most important person in your operating session is your yard master.
Oh, yes.
because he's the one that controls the whole layout. There, I ran on a the layout takes up 1,700 square foot, so you get an idea how big that is.
Mm-hmm.
At one time, if we didn't have the right yard master there, we could have 3 trains, and these were 25 and 30 car trains in HO, waiting out on the main line to get into the yard.
Wow.
Because the yard master wasn't getting things done like they should. So just everybody that's listening to this, please understand your yard master is your most important person. No question.
Absolutely.
Also, if I might interject into this, is that also on how many sessions have you run so far, Joe?
4 complete, and we're going to be coming up on 5th in November.
Right. So you had run 4, and I was on your second one.
Second, yeah.
I was involved in the second one, and some of the guys were new. I was new. The yard master you had was new.
Yeah, poor Mike. He never seen this layout before, and he got dumped right into the meat grinder.
Right. Well, right, because it was based on a seniority thing. I was the last guy in, so I was the last guy to pick. So I wound up with the 2 trains out of the yard, the 225 car trains, consists that came out. And, it was in. But Mike was running the yard, and so there was an unfamiliarity with the yard itself. So that's something to take in consideration. And the fact also that Joe also is working out the kinks, and I think that's important to I think as you guys go into this I had a dry run here, before in the spring, we had a dry run with my son and I. And we made a ton of mistakes. My son Michael is not a railroad guy and doesn't understand. He gets it. He's a smart guy. Don't get me wrong. But for myself, we ran into a ton of mistakes. And instead of just getting frustrated with it, we worked with it. I wrote down a cheat sheet of everything that happened, and I think it was important. So I think the main thing is when you guys out there are listening who are thinking about doing this is not to get overwhelmed, and to take it. I know that when I was at Joe's house, Joe had me run, 2 trains out. I was a little apprehensive because I've never done operations before. But once I brought the train up and I said to the yard master, okay, so what do you need me to do? And he was like, oh, well, just put the 2 engines behind the switch there and I'll call you when I need you. That's when the bell went off in my head. And this was like, oh, I'm working for the Transit Authority again. We're drinking coffee and shooting the breeze.
I think, Joe, one of the things I'd like to talk about, because I've got a picture of here, but I think we'll hold off for a minute here or two. So we do engine cards, talk about those, and then you do some things with bad order cars that I never messed a whole lot with. But I think one of the things that's kind of important that we should talk about tonight.
That's a good point.
How you talked about how do you make up the train that Mike asked. I think that was a great question. There's also a thing about how do you set the order of the trains to run there. And you can talk about how you did it on mine. I can talk about how I did it on mine. Do you have engine cards? You do have, don't you, Joe?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Show the engine cards and I'll show mine, and then you can do that.
So my engine cards are pretty basic. What I usually do in my packet is, if you see this, I made this little blue card up. That's the train name card. So that just sticks in the engine pocket. And then if you see a binder clip denotes that the whole packet is together. So my operators know that, oh, that's mine. So is it in focus there, guys?
Pretty close. Pretty
Okay.
close.
So the top is going to be your engine number. Then that's going to be the road name, the unit type, and then my decoder address, and then where it goes back to when it's not in service. So this, unfortunately, this one here, it says Brown Yard because that's where the engine facility is. But currently I have this little layout, this little area over here is actually, it's independent of Brown Yard. This little area down here represents the Parlin Yard. So the locomotive we're working with here is assigned to the Parlin Yard for the day. So it should say return light to Parlin. But for this one, I don't change it because I cycle through the locomotives in and out of Parlin. So those are my engine cards.
Okay. Yeah. You don't have a train card, do you? An actual train card?
All I do is just put
You do it all in one. You do it all in one. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, because what I did, Johnny, I sent you 3 or 4 of them that say engine card. I don't care which one you bring up whichever one you can find there. That's fine. Is that the Burlington Northern GP30? Is that what it is? Okay. I'll call it up on mine. So this is my engine card. Again, pretty obviously I made them myself, is what I did. And this went into the pocket of a train card that I had, where I had it set up for the train to run. And this information here, the operator knew what kind of decoder it had, what type of decoder it had, what the number of the decoder had, and then where I show low miles per hour and max miles per hour. That was really for my benefit because I had a database set up. One of the things you folks will learn real quick when you hold an operating session is everybody's internal clocks work differently, and people run trains at different speeds. What you want to do is you want to take your engines and you want to get them all running at a maximum speed. So I don't know if Joe's got one, but I bought a speed tunnel and I took every engine on my layout and I made sure not any of them ran over 40 miles an hour scale speed. On the Camas Prairie, most of the running was done at 30 miles an hour or so. And I set it up to 40 for one simple reason. It's really hard to clean wheels when the engine's running at 30 miles per hour scale speed. The wheels don't get cleaned very well. And that. Yeah. So by setting the speed that way for my engines, we're kind of getting a little slightly off topic, but I think it's important there. I don't care what the operator's internal clock was. He was only going to go so fast with that train. He couldn't whip it up, where it was running 60, 70 miles an hour and that. So, but this is the train car that I got. Again, done it myself. All of it. The picture was the most important thing because when you gave a train to an operator, said you signed him a train, he's looking for an engine and an engine number. Well, if you got a picture of it, it's pretty easy to do that and take care of that. So that was mine. And then my problem with my train cards is I could never make up my mind what I wanted. So I sent Johnny 2 or 3 of them, different ones. Bring up that one, Johnny, that says train card number 3. There. It'll be in that group. Okay. 251. The 251 designated the train. That was train 251. It wasn't engine 251. If you see, this is again another pocket. This is what the train card you just seen went into. It went into this pocket. All the information I had on this was for the operator. He was going to be running 251, which was a Burlington Northern freight that was westbound. It was a through freight. It ran from upper staging to lower staging there, and his instructions were westbound through freight, stops at Lewiston Yard to drop off and pick up cars. It really wasn't his job to worry about which cars needed to be picked up or dropped off because once he got to Lewiston Yard, it was the yardmaster took over this train. And it was the yardmaster that decided what to pull out. The yardmaster decided what to put in the train. And as soon as that all was done, this train took off again and went to staging and was gone and never came back during that op session. So I had the engine card and I have this train card, 2 separate ones, but they did fit together. Okay, back to you, Joe.
Okay, so couple quick things that what I had to do with the Micromar system because I noticed some peculiarities that with my layout was through trains. I did, even though it's not prototypical, I wanted to have some through trains to come through, so I want to be able to designate those easily. So all I did was I changed my colors to green. Now, the only thing I did is I just went to Staples and bought some fancy green paper and printed it out. So it has the train indication using the Conrail designation. And then I just made a 2-cycle waybill out of green paper And that just says that we're going from track 5 back to track 5, just so the operator understands. Couple other cars that came in. I have a sand pit down in Jackson. They have sand hoppers that come out. Well, they need to be weighed. So I was running into how do you get them out of the division and indicate that they need to be weighed, because I've built a scale track over in Brown's Yard. So I came up with a weigh in transit card, and that's what this is. This just tells the yard master, hey, that car can't leave the yard until you run it through the scale. And we'll cover scale operations in a later topic. So just that's what I ended up making for that. The other one was again with the mine. Well, it's the sand pit. It runs more like a coal mine, so this also applies to coal operations. Was I'm moving blocks of hoppers where you have 6 to 10 hoppers, and I didn't need an individual weigh bill for each hopper because they're moving as a unit. So I just went and I made a mine block card, and all that does just says the first the number on the card is the first car in the string and the last car in the string. And it just tells the train operator that whole block moves as a unit down from the yard to the sand pit. So those are the extra things that popped up that I had to do. A second was like a customer request form. You know, at a certain plant, they may say, "Hey, we need this car moved to a different area of the plant because we need that product in a different plant," or maybe the lumber yard or the sand pit. Their loading hopper, the device they use to load their hoppers is on the north end of the facility. So I made that up here, and that tells the train crews, hey, these hoppers need to be spotted at the north end, and all the rest of it goes down into the facility. So just little things that I made as I was going, and I said, oh, this is kind of like a little unusual situation. I don't want the operators to get confused with, so I just make a card as I go. So I think that's the big thing with the MicroMart system is it's kind of flexible. You can kind of mold it to the way you want it, but they give you a good basis to start. To get to this point where I am now, though, you gotta work at it, because, like I said, you get them bill boxes and all these car cards and weigh bills, and the directions just say fill it out. So it's like the MicroMart gives you no real guidance. So you got to kind of really craft it to the way that fits and suits your layout.
It also would help too if you could go someplace who has a layout, who's been doing operations, to partake in that, and don't be afraid to jump in, even if you don't know what you're doing. Obviously you go there if you're invited. By all means, you go and you tell the person, hey, I've never done this before. Can you help me out here or whatever? If you join a club in your area, community, that's how you learn.
How did you, Joe, decide how the order of the way the trains were going to run? Because that kind of ties into what Mike asked a little earlier. He asked, how do you do trains? How did you decide which ones to run? I
just did it geographically. I sent the train that has the yard is at the north end of the layout, and everything else is south of the yard. Okay, all the industries. So what I did was I said the first train out is the furthest one to travel. So that's going to the furthest, most southern point on the layout. Then the next one, and then the next one. So that it's kind of like a parade of trains going out in the beginning of the session. And then they all block the last train blocks everybody in. So then once everybody's got their work done, then they just turn their trains and they parade themselves back to the yard. So that's really how I run it.
Did you worry about, because I'll show it here in a little bit on mine. Did you worry about certain trains had to run before other trains because those trains were dependent on picking up cars that were going to come in from some industry on the layout?
No, because the way that even though it's a big Class 1 railroad, the Conrail, this area of New Jersey is kind of was kind of operated like a regional railroad. Okay. Where the transfer train would come in and drop off all the cars, then Conrail and Brown's Yard would break up these groups of cars into these little trains and then send them out. And, depending, certain days they ran certain trains and they didn't run other trains. But none of the trains themselves were interconnected. You know what I'm saying? They didn't depend on each other. Does that answer?
That's where you and I probably differed a little bit because of the different type of railroads, too.
Correct.
And that. Um,
I think one of the things. Oh, go ahead, Bill. I'm sorry.
you're doing good.
No, I was just saying that's also part of the equation. I think is I know earlier on in you and me speaking, you quickly reminded me that this layout is a bigger part of a national railroad, the more that are coming in, and once you establish that, you have a mindset of where you're going to go. And also earlier, story. There's a story that goes with it. So
That's right.
when you do your layout, it's good to have. It's interesting to have when people come to my layout, the South Brooklyn, to explain to them how this works and apply this. And some of the places I have are real names and and real action. So it makes it more realistic and it makes it more enjoyable for the operators. Again, just to
Any questions? Any questions?
no, everybody's saying hello to everybody. It's sort of like a meet and greet here. Nobody's actually.
Johnny, bring up that one that I've got says op session number 13. This is where Joe and I differ, and I think it just has to do with our different philosophies and the fact that he's doing a prototype. I'm doing a prototype, but trying to make it easier. There. It's up. Yeah, up the top it says CPRR op session number 13. Guess what? This was our op session number 13 we ran. I did what was called, I do a sequential order. I don't use timetables and all that kind of stuff, fast clocks, none of that stuff. I simply put together we'll use this one as an example. I put together 17 trains to run during this op session. Those trains are lined up in a very specific order because of the way my railroad was designed. Keep in mind that I had 3 staging yards. I had East staging, West staging, and I had Montana Rail Link staging because I had a connection to Montana Rail Link. So what I did was there was very little switching I did on my Camas Prairie Railroad that was inner layout switching, where industries switch cars out between themselves. I think that's very, very unrealistic. Nobody's got a layout big enough that you can justify having a mine and then, running stuff over, a few feet to a power plant. It just doesn't feel realistic. So on my railroad, everything pretty much left the railroad and stuff came onto the railroad there. So what you see in the first column is what says top train order. That's exactly what it was. That was the order that I set up to run the trains. Next was the train number. Johnny brought up that 251 a few minutes ago. There it is. It was the first train to run that night on this op session. One of the reasons to run that is the previous op session, I had probably 6 or 7 or 8 or 10 cars sitting in the yard that had come in for this westbound through freight at the very end of the op session, the previous op session. So those cars needed to leave, be some of the first cars to leave. So that was one of the reasons to run this through freight. There was another very good reason to run it. If you've got somebody new on your layout who's never run the layout before, one of the best jobs you can give them is to run a through freight, because in my layout, all they had to do was stop at Lewiston and let the yard masters pull cars and put cars into it there. But the important thing for the operator was they got to run the whole layout. They ran the whole layout with the train, and that's the best way for a new operator to learn the layout, where it goes and all that stuff. But each one of these is in a specific order. Where it says origin and term, which means terminate, US was upper staging, LS was lower staging. If you see LY, that was Lewiston Yard. Or if you see MS over there, that was Montana Rail Link staging, is what it was. So this is where those cars went. If you'll notice, where down to number 7, where it was that Spalding turn that we showed earlier on one of those waybills. Okay, Spalding turn left Lewiston Yard, LY, returned to Lewiston Yard. That was its job, to go out and come back there. But the way these trains ran was very, very specific order. Interesting thing about this, and I think Joe can agree with me on this, you think you've got this down pat, you think it's going to work right, and that. This was the 13th op session I held, and I can guarantee you, because none of them went the way, we never went through this in the specific order. By the time we got to the afternoon shift, things had gotten screwed up pretty much, and I was the dispatcher. This was my dispatcher sheet, is basically what you're looking at here. And I'd have to see what the operators were doing and all that. And, the potlatch turn, which was the first one to run in the afternoon shift, 12 cars to shift to set out, 12 cars to pick up. 45 minutes in real time is what it would take a good operator to run that shift and that. I had one gentleman, I've told the story before, that was new to my layout. And he says, I want the hardest job on the layout. I said, well, that's the potlatch turn, and it'll be the first one out in the afternoon shift. I want to run that one. I said, okay. About almost 2 hours later, he still wasn't finished. Because there was no tricks to it. You just had to know what to pull, how to set it out. But my best operator still would take him 35 minutes to switch that one out. One thing I think is really important, and Joe doing N-scale can attest to this too, I think, the hardest thing to replicate in an operating session, no matter how big or how small your layout is time and distance.
Time.
It's very, very hard to do. So that's one of the reasons I slowed down all of my engines so the operators couldn't run real fast. And this sequential system worked good for me because I could send an operator out with a train. We usually had 4 operators on my layout. I never operated. I was always the dispatcher. But I had 1 yard master and 3 guys running trains out on the layout. Those guys that I would send out on the layout with a turn or a local or something, the longer they were gone, the better off the layout was. The easier it was on the yard master. Because I tried this also got set up so that these trains were coming into the yard at different times where we weren't overwhelming the yard master with a lot of work to be done.
I have a comment. I have a comment / I guess a question.
Sure.
Hockey 107 says, but Bill, due to space for most people, the next industry might be 4 feet away. Trains do 4 laps, then they can deliver their product, their industry.
He's absolutely right. No question about that. The problem is even for my clients that I design for, I really try to stress staging to them because everybody, I keep saying this every time I'm on these shows, but I mean it. Everybody needs to go buy this book right here. The V&O story.
Yeah, that's a good book.
Everybody needs to buy that book. You can take the electronic chapters and you can throw them away. They mean nothing because the book was published in 1980 something. But everything else in that book by Alan McClellan is just as true today as it was when this book was done. This is my Bible. This V&O story is my Bible on operations. And Alan said in there, think of your layout as a mini transportation system, not a model railroad. And the only way you can have it operate like a mini transportation system, you have to have staging there if you're going to do that. Now, some people don't have room for staging. I totally understand that. And I have fortunately been able to find for people who didn't think they had room, I've been able to find, even if I could get them 2 staging yards, that means they can run 4 trains on that layout. They feel like they're going somewhere. The trains are actually doing something and going somewhere.
I have a question from Andy Crawford. He says, I too have a dependency in scheduled turns. With coal traffic, you might need MTYS to satisfy blowout schedules, and you need to clear loads with mine schedules. How do you document for that?
Well, Johnny, is that op session 13 still up? Okay. I didn't have that problem. You'll notice trains 11 and 12. They were Montana Rail Link coal drags. One was loaded, one was empty. Okay. I didn't have coal mine on my railroad. I had a branch line, actually kind of had 2 branch lines, but I didn't have a coal mine on the layout. So these trains ran from staging to staging. Number 11 ran from Montana Rail Link staging to lower staging. The empty ran from lower staging to Montana staging. Now, what I did between op sessions is I took the coal loads that were in the loaded one that was now, after the op session, was sitting in the lower staging yard. I took the coal loads out of those cars between op sessions, and I carried them over, and I put them in that coal drag that was sitting now in Montana rail link staging, and I filled it up. So it became a loaded one, and then that train turned into number 11 at the next op session. All these coal trains did for me was simply, and you notice I ran them real close together. I did that because it was a really neat scene on the railroad if I got both those trains running together, because they would pass each other somewhere on the railroad. So I didn't have to, when Andy's talking about, I understand what he's talking about. I didn't have to deal with that because my coal drags were basically just run-throughs, is what they were.
Yeah, his next statement is indeed, time is so critical, it's even underestimated even. Best thing you can do on your layout to increase prototype fidelity is slow down. Remember, you are recreating the operation of tons of equipment.
That's right. Okay, Joe, your turn.
Okay, so what's
okay.
What'd you say?
I just have some questions here.
Fire away.
Always have room. Andy Crawford says, always have room for staging. I've had a 4x8 with staging. Sparky 10717 says, my main staging is going to be my main rail yard, which will be part of the working layout. Oh, here's a good question from Joe G. Is the V&O by Alan McLennan better than the OPSIGS Group Operations book? I think that, I think it's a companion book, Joe. That's my opinion.
Yeah, here I'll show this title. I'll show it again here, so everybody can see it. If you don't know it, it's a V&O story by Alan McLennan. Is who it is. You can buy it online. You can buy it through Amazon. I think it's $20 there. The thing why people need to read this is because Alan was way, way, way ahead of his time. There, he was into operations before we ever had DCC. There, he was one of the first people that actually started designing a layout with staging in it. That had not really been heard of much before. Right. You can look at John Armstrong's most of his layouts, neat, kind of nice looking layouts, but they were really designed as display layouts to a certain extent. They weren't designed as operating layouts. And that
my GS
all about operations.
I believe that book, along with the OPSIG book, would be a good companion book.
The OPSIG book is fine. Where the OPSIG guys get into trouble is they get into so much detail in the minutia of things. Sometimes you kind of, you got to sort through it.
Yeah, you can't see the trees through the forest.
Yeah. The first chapter that Alan has in this book, and that's what kind of tripped me on it, is he talked about guys going out on a road trip to watch a train run up through the Appalachian Mountains in Virginia there. And Alan talked about this and was showing trains, pictures in the book. He wasn't talking about a model railroad. He was talking about these guys looking at a real railroad, running a real railroad. That's how his mind was. That's what his mind said.
Mike G asked, do you guys ever think to just have track lists and work orders instead of car cards? The work order tells the crew what cars to pick up and deliver. The track list tells them where they are.
Joe, I'll give my 2 cents about switch lists. You go ahead and say what you think about it.
All right. So let me turn my camera here, because while you guys were, I beg your pardon. Okay. We won't do anything bad. So
principals leaving the room.
Yeah, the principals leaving. So what I ran into is I'm going to be having operators come down here of varying abilities, newcomers and veterans. So what I wanted to do was I didn't want to just hand him a pack of car cards, because you're fumbling. The car the way I ran the railroad in my layout is that the car cards are kind of my way of administering the layout. Okay. giving these to operators, I feel, was a little cumbersome. Dropping them, it's a lot to look through when you're new to the layout. Looking at these waybills, you get a little overwhelmed. So I didn't want to slow the session down. That was my concern. So what I devised the idea is I'm going to transpose this work that's dictated by the car cards to a switch list. Now, all the switch list is this is a visual work order. So I'm just going to hand this to you and say, here's your work for the day, and here's your car cards. So by the way, when you do your work, just drop the car card in the bill box and pick it up, because the switch list will tell you exactly what to do. So I've eliminated that kind of apprehension when you hand somebody 50 car cards and say, here you go. You know, I've given them, I take the time as the layout owner to just go through and make these out for them. I mean, I could be a real jerk and say, here's a blank switch list, fill them out for yourself. But I go ahead and just take that extra step to fill them out and say, here's a visual representation of the work you got to do. If you want to use it, awesome. If not, just put it aside. And that's what I use the switch list for. That's it. I'm still dictating the movements and the train orders off of the car cards. I'm just putting in a visual representation for my operators.
You're kind of doing a hybrid type thing.
Correct.
Yeah.
Because my fear bill is I don't want to get a newcomer to come down here and overwhelm him and him get turned off on operations.
Yeah.
You know, so I'm just doing that little extra for them because, hey, you know what? I look at it this way. People are coming to the house to run my layout for me. So I just want to do a little something extra for them. And
as soon as you said that, it reminded me, the whole damn reason you build these layouts for operation is to have op sessions and have people come and enjoy it.
Correct.
It's the reason you do it. There, people can, your railroad comes to life.
I have a question.
Okay.
Go ahead, Bill.
The question I have is, what do we do? What do you do when let's say the op session ends and cars are positioned at their location of the industry? What do you do with the car cards themselves?
I know what I do. Go ahead, Joe. I'll tell them what you do with it.
I don't quite understand the question.
Well, I have a box car. I have a box car. Let's just give you an example. I have a box cars for Giovanni's grocery distributor. He's got 16 cases. He's got a box car full of canned peas. But the work day's over for his crew. Nobody wants to do OT, so the car's going to sit there because it's not perishable. What does he do with the car card for that?
So you're saying the car doesn't get delivered, you ran out of time, what do you do then? Is that
the car has been delivered, but we just ran out of time. Everything's shutting down because it's getting late. So the car's going to stay there till the next operation, and it's got to be unloaded. So what do we do with that card? I
put a hold on the card. What I do is, I got to look for it. I put them all away. I usually take a paper clip, a colored paper clip, so you can see it, and I paper clip it in the position it's in, and I drop it back in the box. So next session, I know, hey, this card didn't make it out. It got left. And I can't turn the waybill because the paper clip's in the way. So then this way, the operator knows, or I remember when I'm planning my next session, hey, this train's got an extra car you got to pick up because it wasn't moved out the day before.
Okay.
I'm sorry I don't have a paper clip to demonstrate. I kind of put them away. I lost them.
Also, Joe, did I hear you say that you have your operators turn the waybills?
Only when instructed.
Okay. Because that was one of the things everything about mine was simplification here. My operators never had to turn a waybill anywhere on there. And what I did, example of what Billy was talking about there, if I had when the turn went out, the Spalding turn, we talked about that, when the Spalding turn went out and that hopper car got left at the Spalding cement plant, okay, what I had the operator do is take that car card and waybill, stick it in the slot like you've got on the fascia of your layout there, stick it in the box. But what I had them do is I had them turn them around backwards.
Oh, back. Yes. One of my operators, Mike and Eric, they like to do that. They turn them backwards, and I get confused because I'm not used to it. I understand.
Well, the reason I did that, because the car's been spotted, it's where it should be. They put the car card in that box. It's turned backwards. That car doesn't move again during that op session. So then after the op session is over with, then what I did is I went around the whole layout, and every card that was turned backwards, I turned around, and then I flipped the waybill.
Okay.
So the car was ready to be picked up on the next op session and go wherever the the waybill said it was supposed to go, but that way, see, I didn't have very many situations where two trains would go through the same town and both trains were switching the same town. I had one or two that did that.
Okay.
But that was the way that the operators wouldn't get confused, because I told them if the waybill's turned backwards, don't touch that car. Leave that car alone. There. Now, let me do my little pet peeve about switch lists. As I said earlier, I operate on probably 5 different layouts out here. Some of them world class, some of them very nice layouts. One of the nice layouts I operated on, we would move 300 cars in an op session. It was the layout was about 1,500 square foot. He used a program called Ship It, which was totally computer generated switch lists. And when I would get a train to run, that would do like Joe showed there, that's handwritten. This would be printed out like in off of a computer. The problem comes in with a switch list is everything works perfectly until one of your operators spots the car at the wrong industry.
Correct. I agree 100%.
The switch list and the computer program doesn't know that. It doesn't know that happened. So, and I operated probably at least a half a dozen to a dozen times on this layout that use the Ship It program. And we actually had to assign a person during an op session who wasn't running a train to go find cars that were misspotted.
Oh.
Now, try to find a car on a layout with 300 or 400 cars on it. And you're looking for cars. You know what car you're looking for, but it's hard to, because what you don't know where that car got misspotted. You don't know what happened to it and that. So then when the operating session is over with, the Ship It program generates a new switch list for the next op session, and it thinks that car is sitting at the Spalding Cement when it's sitting over at a co-op grain facility or something. It doesn't know any better. And the other problem he had with the Switch It program is because we were doing almost 300 cars in op session, getting it balanced so that you wouldn't get an industry that ended up with, you had space for 4 cars and Ship It told it that you needed to drop off 8 cars at that industry. That was that got to be a problem. It's not a problem with car cards and waybills, because I don't know if you do this, Joe, but I did it on mine. Every one of my locations where I was having switching done, I had an off spot box.
Yeah, I designate my runarounds as an off spot box.
Right. And so tell people what an off spot is so they know what it is.
That, I don't know how to describe it. It's kind of like a car that doesn't get, it doesn't have a designated location. So like a team track, or I use the off spot for like an overflow, like there wasn't enough car room on the spur. What's another example? Yeah, I'm having trouble with words tonight. Right?
I would tell my operators, if you can't spot the car at the industry it's supposed to be spotted at, spot it at the off spot track there, and put the car card in there and leave it facing out. Don't turn it around now. Leave it facing out on that one.
Okay. Yep.
Because then what would happen is I would know for the next op session, I would tell who was operating, you've got to spot that car first. After you do your pulls, that car has to go in first because it should have went in last op session. The other thing about car cards we haven't even talked about tonight before we close this thing, I think is really, really important. If you misspot a car using car cards and waybills, it's not a big deal, because as soon as you flip the waybill over for the next cycle, if the car is spotted wrong, that's no big deal. It gets picked up, and now the car card tells you where it's supposed to go. the system is self-correcting.
Self-correcting, yes.
All I can tell you about out here in Colorado, on the ones I operate on, the two world-class layouts that I operate on, both of them use car cards and waybills.
Right.
Because they think that's the best way to do it.
Yeah, I think it's a more structured, and it's the big thing is self-correcting. You mess it up, it'll fix itself.
Absolutely.
And I think also one of the other things that's most important is to when we have operations, it's the fellowship.
Absolutely.
That we have.
Yeah. Great time.
I think that I think that's the most crucial part of it, is that you bind friendships, and I know that when I went to Joe's, I met a bunch of great guys there. We had such great conversations. So if you mess up, that's why they put erasers at the end of pencils.
Well, like I used to say, and I say it about my track plans. If I design a track plan for you and you build it exactly like I designed it, I did something wrong. I screwed it up some way, somehow. But I also tell them.
Go ahead, Bill. I'm sorry.
And I also say to them, Bill, if you hold an off session and everything goes perfect, it was no fun.
I am with you. I can attest, Bill, on your previous statement about you build it correctly, and I have made so many changes on this layout track-wise that it really was a blueprint that you gave me, and I've had so much fun with it and enjoyment.
All I had to do was get you over the hump. That's all you needed to do. Was get you over the hump.
Yes, sir. That's what you did.
Okay.
I think we're going to call this the end for right now.
Well, one more quick topic before we go.
Well, go ahead. Let's go, Joe. Go.
So while everybody was talking, I went ahead and performed this work. So I ran the SAO too. So what I did was I made the deliveries and I made the pickups. So these are my empty outbounds. So what I'm going to show you how to do now with this card real quick before we go, just to give you a taste, is what you have to do next. You're going to take your car cards and you're going to put them in the boxes. And I'm going to pick up my outbound that I took with me. I'll drop in that load I dropped. I'll make my packet back up to go back to the yard. And my train is all set to go. So I made my work. I did all my deliveries and I made my pickups. I also was able to do the runaround, and I'm ready to go back home. So.
And
it's
next
not
month, it's not rocket science.
It's fun.
Right. And it's not brain surgery, so no one's going to die from it. No one's going to die from it. And that's on next month's show. Next month, into Joe's train room, we're going to do movement of trains.
Yes. So that's a little segue of what we're going to be doing next month.
Right, because we have the actual layout where we can actually run trains on and do a simulated operation of how this all works out. What we said on this.
I thought this was a good segue into it, and having Mr. Baranek here, who's got a very different outlook than I do, but the common theme here, what we wanted to portray is there is no wrong way. There's 100 different ways to do this. As long as you get it, we all come to this. We're all going to the same place. We're just getting there different ways.
That is true.
Have fun.
And have fun while you're doing it.
Exactly. Have fun and enjoy yourself and meet new people and interesting people and stuff like that. So with that said, I want to thank both you gentlemen, Mr. Baranek and Joe Desmond, for allowing us to pick your minds and into your house with your layout, and Bill, you over there in Colorado. Just a few things for future shows in the works. On October 9th, we're going to have the Fine Scale Show with Andy and Miles. And on the 17th of next month of October, we're going to go back to this show into Joe's train room. And it's going to be built based on operations, and we're going to be doing movement of trains. Those two shows will be at 8 p.m. Central Time, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Then every Thursday, like clockwork, like everything else, like morning coffee, we're going to have Johnny's Model Train Talk. That's at 9 p.m. Central Time, 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And that's open to the community where you can jump in to, as you can see us on the video. If you have a webcam, you can join in, and good internet, you can see and be part of. If you're working on a project, that's the place to go. If you have questions for anything about your model railroading and what's going on, then more than happy to help you with it and guide you through it. And by all means, come and be a part of it. Also, be aware that Bill Baronic, Mr. Baronic, has a article that is encompassing what we did tonight in the Modelers Journal e-mag that's coming out the end of September, the beginning of October. If you're not a subscriber to that magazine, I would suggest you head over to their website, www.themodelersjournal.com, and subscribe to them. That magazine, the Modelers magazine, is encompassing all types of modeling, railroad modeling, airplane, cars, everything. It's encompassing the whole model world. So anything that you need to find out or want to find out, please go right ahead and check that. And they're looking for contributors to write for them. If you don't know how to write, put two words together. They have a great staff that will help you with it and stuff like that. And Mr. Baronic has an article that's coming out that's kind of joined in at the hips with this. So if you need more information, please look at that Modelers Journal.
And so everybody know, Bill, too. I never, I realize that I have a business and people think it's a business, and it is a business, but I'll be happy to answer questions for people. There.
I was just gonna plug that out there. I was just gonna say Mr. Baronic is, he has a website and it's the track planner, and he does build, for a fee. But if you have a question, he's more than willing to answer anything and everything with you and help you along. So, don't hesitate to reach out to him. Joe Desmond, what's the name of your YouTube channel, sir? I keep messing this up, and I do apologize.
Central Jersey Conrail in scale.
There you go. Check Joe's.
We just came out with a new episode. It's up on the channel, and it's showing how I did the scenery over here over my shoulder. And we'll be having another one coming out in a couple weeks. So we're starting the scenery over. Well, actually, it's pretty far along, but this video is going to chronicle the scenery over in the Browns yard.
Hey, thank you again, Joe. Thank you again, Bill. And thank you to John, our director, for putting up with us and for the glitches that he takes care of that we have no idea that's going behind the scenes, and he handles it flawlessly. So for me and YouTube model builders, without you guys watching, there's no sense us being on. Take care. God bless, and we'll see you guys on the radio.
Good night.
All right.